What's up, it's JB, welcome back to another World at War Zombies Remastered video. We've already looked at the menu, so today we'll be looking at more noticeable in-game changes. It was important to me that every change had a logical reason behind it to back it up. I obviously don't want to detract from the classic World at War experience. At the same time, this mod does aim to offer the most polished and consistent experience of World at War Zombies while still retaining what makes each map special. This episode is centered around two of the most fundamental parts of the game mode: zombies and players. Later, I can then get into the specifics of perks, traps, weapons, etc. All four maps now use the same equation for calculating the amount of zombies per round. This formula was the most polished after Treyarch had perfected their craft after several DLCs of modifying it. There's only one exception, which is that on the early rounds of co-op Verrückt, there are a few more zombies than usual just to compensate for the players being split up. Putting this formula on the first three maps now means that there's no more 24 zombie limit in solo, so if you're killing a horde, they're going to keep spawning in, which makes the experience much more intense and balanced. Of course, if you want to revert this change, you can still disable it in my custom settings page. Now this does make the game much harder, so on the flip side, I've also added a new toggle setting if you want to disable or enable the grabbing effect of zombies. So we all know in World at War, this was the one zombie game where when you touched a zombie, it felt like you were getting pulled in and you couldn't move. Some players liked this, and some didn't, so it's up for you to decide how you want to play. The one creative change I did make is that the early rounds have better pacing. Round 2 also only has walkers like round 1. You almost let the player get more comfortable in a slower build-up, which makes the payoff much better when things get scarier. Okay, and so that's it for the universal changes to zombies, but we also have some individual changes. While this category of changes is mostly aesthetic, I do want to be clear that there's two areas where it does affect gameplay, which is that on Nacht der Untoten, as I hinted in the previous clip, I did add additional super sprinters because I really think they fit the atmospheres of these maps. However, it is completely optional if you want to disable it. So the other area is that I went back to Nacht der Untoten and added in some missing animations. There are now more hit animations and more traverse animations, meaning that zombies can hit you through barriers, they can sometimes hit you a bit faster, and they also will climb through their barriers faster when they're sprinting. We know Zombies was very iterative back in the day, developers would keep coming up with new ideas in each DLC. I do think that there should be more consistency brought back to the old maps, but I don't think it should be overdone. I really like the progression from a small bare-bones map like Nacht all the way to Riese, slowly introducing perks, then bosses, then wonder weapons and Pack-a-Punch. People ask me to add perks and Pack-a-Punch to maps that didn't have them, but I just don't think this fits. However, with something as small as the individual zombie behavior, that's something where I do think it should be a bit more consistent. This also does balance out with how I've made zombies not grab you, so even if they're a little bit more intense with their hits, you're still able to escape them a little bit easier. There is no jug on this map, so to be fair, I did rebalance the hit animations so that while the zombies do have the ability to hit faster like later maps, they're also much more likely to do their old animations where they pause and stop to hit you. In this way, we keep the best of both worlds. The zombies are a bit more intense and consistent with each map, but it's also a little bit more balanced for the player. I always like the fan theory that Nacht der Untoten zombies are a bit slower and dumber, so this kind of fits with that, where they're more likely to pause before they hit you. The classic Nacht der Untoten sounds are still intact though, gotta love these ones, and I did do some slight reorganization because sometimes some of the sounds were repeated over multiple categories. Also, Nacht der Untoten had one unique crawler animation for some reason that was cut on later maps, and I've definitely kept that, even though I did add in the other crawler animations. I had to keep this OG one. I even added it to Verrückt because I feel like these maps go together so well. So now I can get back on track to just the aesthetic changes in zombie appearance and their animations. First up, I added a cut walking animation that was found in the game files and was later used in Black Ops 1. I think it looks pretty cool, so I added it to all German variants of zombies. Next, on Shi No Numa, I actually found 3 cut animations, one for walkers, one for runners, and one for sprinters. So I did each of them, and for the runner and sprinter variants, I made these new animations much more rare, so you'll occasionally see them, but they're not going to be as common as the classics. Speaking of Shi No Numa zombies, while on Shi No Numa they updated the tear animation so that the zombies actually grab the physical board, like Riese, they were only halfway there and they didn't update it for crawlers, so I've gone ahead and done that. So now on Riese and Shi No Numa, both crawlers and normal zombies actually grab the physical boards. As for taunts, I normalized these throughout every map, except I purposely kept them off of Nacht der Untoten because I think it fits with this map's atmosphere where the zombies are a little bit slower and less advanced. So that's it for animations. It can be a bit confusing to explain, but here's a quick summary on screen. As for textures, I only made one change, which is that there is a new variant of zombies on Nacht der Untoten. Zombies can now spawn with a Waffen SS camouflage uniform, This is pretty cool because it fits the atmosphere of the map, which is much more militaristic, rather than the other maps which are more like facilities, and you probably wouldn't see as many camouflaged Germans. This also goes hand in hand with the next change, which is that zombies now have a rare % chance of actually spawning with gear. So while I made all 4 maps have variants where zombies can spawn with headwear, I did only add body gear to Nacht der Untoten and Verrückt, which again, I feel like these 2 maps are more militaristic and it makes sense that the zombies would be more equipped as opposed to Riese, which is a factory in a city. So in Nacht der Untoten, this is what the odds for gear look like, and we can see in-game how that's reflected. The body gear is just a combination of random pouches and bags, whereas the headgear can be a variety of either helmets, a cap, or a camouflaged helmet if it's an SS German. Then, when we get to Verrückt, further off where the front lines would have been, we don't have any more camouflage and we're more likely to be wearing caps rather than helmets. I also thought it would be cool if only on Verrückt the zombies could even spawn with bandages on them. Were they tortured? Were they wounded? Who knows? Then, moving on to Shi No Numa, we drop the gear and instead just have a small % chance that zombies can wear a helmet. Finally, we get to Riese, same thing, no more gear, but zombies can still spawn with the occasional headwear. I also made it so when you shoot a zombie with a helmet, it will actually pop off their head, make a special sound, and fling in the direction depending on where you shot them from. So to end off the appearance section, I made all the zombies in the DLCs actually have glowing eye effects. This was something that was introduced in Nacht der Untoten, but for some reason did not make it into the later DLCs. It was possibly cut to performance or them wanting to rewrite how this code worked, but to me it worked fine as it was in Nacht der Untoten, and it should have been included in all the other maps. In fact, even in the DLC trailers you could see that the zombies had glowing eye effects, but when you actually went in-game there was nothing emanating from their eye. Even if they still had colored eyes, the effect was missing. Next, we have the player with a bunch of miscellaneous changes that I'm going to go through quickly. First, mission intros. These were on Riese and Verrückt, but I thought it was a cool detail, so I decided to add them to all maps now, and they're also all in the same format. Next, movement speed. On console, the player actually moves slightly faster when moving backwards and sideways. On PC, it was nerfed, possibly for balance, but I think it should be more consistent between platforms, so I've gone ahead and buffed the sideways and backwards movement speed. Also, speaking of console features, on the console version you could switch to first-person spectating, but for some reason on PC this was cut, so I've gone ahead and added that. If you hold down F now while you're spectating, you can switch to first person. After death when you respawn, you'll also receive the same compensation on every map. On later maps they had made it so that you receive some points so you weren't completely lost when you respawned. And when you're revived, the player that revives you also receives the same award on all 4 maps now. This was something that they hadn't put in Nacht der Untoten when they first made zombies. Also, when you're in Last Stand, the bleed out time has been buffed from 30 seconds to now 45 seconds like Black Ops 1, but this is also toggleable as I showed in my previous video. When you're on the ground, the pistol you choose also is based on a hierarchy now. It goes from the ray gun at the top, then to an upgraded pistol, then to the 357, and then back to your default starting pistol. And, of course, if you have an upgraded variant of any of these weapons, that takes precedent over the unupgraded version. This guarantees that you take out the best pistol when you're down, even if you have multiple in your inventory. Also, if you don't have ammo in a pistol, it will be disregarded and not considered in the pool of pistols to choose from. Originally, in World at War single player, the player had to fall 200 units before taking damage. This was abnormally high compared to other Call of Duties where you only have to fall 128 units, like in Black Ops 1. So I basically split the difference and I put it down to 150 units. We all know that World at War's environment is pretty harsh to the player, so I was actually surprised to find that there was an area where it actually went really easy on you. Also, a quick little change is that you can now have no weapon in zombies. Originally, if you got rid of all your weapons, you'd be given a free Colt, but I've decided to remove this, and now if you pack a punch all your guns, you'll have no weapon on your screen. This is not desirable because you can't even knife, but it's just something interesting that can happen now. While playing, you might also notice the achievement notifications. I talked about this in my previous video, but this is what they look like in-game, and they give a sound, as well as show an image and the text for the achievement. When a player goes to repair barriers now, there's been a few enhancements. First, there's a screen shake effect that plays when the board is placed down. This just looks cool and is also how it was in Black Ops 1. There's also a dust effect that now plays when the board is placed on the map. It was introduced in Nacht der Untoten, but for some reason was cut on later maps. I've fixed the point sound so that it only plays when you're actively earning plus 10 points from barriers. And again, this is how it was in Black Ops 1. I also upscaled the texture of the wood boards so they look a little bit more visually appealing. Slapping on an upscaled texture for every single thing in the map's environment would not be good, and that would take away from what makes World at War's special look. I did this because the boards were especially low quality and you see them so often. So if you've stuck around in the video this long, here's a little bonus section for you. We're going to quickly talk about dogs, which is a subsection of the zombie changes. You just heard that there is a cut sound that's been re-added to Shi No Numa during dog rounds. This was for some reason only on the PS3 version, and can still be heard to this day on that console. I always thought that it was a cool sound and fit the swampy atmosphere. When dogs spawn in on Shi No Numa, they also have some improved AI and pathing, thanks to some code that I've ripped from Riese. Finally, dog health has been slightly rebalanced. As I referenced earlier in this video, Treyarch kept making changes as they went through each DLC. By Riese, they had come up with the final health for the dogs, but it was much stronger than Shi No Numa. I decided to bridge the gap, and I made Shi No Numa dogs a little bit stronger, but not quite as much as Riese, because I do like the idea of dogs being actually really challenging, like on Riese, where they're tough to kill, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that Riese has upgradable guns, so it's not really fair to the player on Shi No Numa, where you're stuck with just regular weapons. And that's going to be all the changes I go over today in this video. Unfortunately, it's impossible for me to go over every single possible feature I've done, but these were all the big ones to the player and the zombies. Now that I've gotten these changes out of the way, I'm going to be moving forward into specific episodes coming out shortly, with an episode on weapons, bug fixes, perks, traps, etc. So definitely subscribe so you'll be able to find those videos when I post them. Anyways, if you want to play the mod, you can find out how to install and download it in the description. That's going to be all for today. Thanks for watching.